The moment Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told President Trump, "You represent everything wrong with capitalism," on live television, she made the catastrophic mistake every socialist makes. She forgot she was attacking a self-made billionaire who actually understands economics. While she couldn't explain where $93 trillion for the Green New Deal would come from, Fox News had organized the Great American Debate, Capitalism versus Socialism, as the political event of the year, possibly the decade. The idea had started as a casual suggestion during a Fox and Friends segment. Wouldn't it be amazing if Trump debated AOC about economics? The audience response had been so overwhelming that within 48 hours, the network had committed to making it happen. They'd reached out to both camps. They'd offered primetime coverage. They'd promoted it as the conversation America desperately needed. To everyone's surprise, both sides agreed. AOC's team had convinced her this was her chance to educate Fox News viewers about democratic socialism, to show America that progressive economics made sense, to prove she was more than a social media sensation. They'd spent weeks preparing her. They'd brought in economists to help her understand the Nordic model. They'd practiced responses to anticipated attacks. They'd prepared talking points about wealth inequality, climate change, and corporate greed. They'd coordinated with friendly media outlets to provide sympathetic coverage. They were confident that AOC's charisma, her communication skills, and her passionate advocacy would win over viewers who had never heard the socialist case presented properly. They had fundamentally misunderstood both their candidate and their opponent. Trump's team had agreed immediately for one simple reason. Trump had been waiting for this moment. For years, he'd watched AOC spread economic nonsense on social media, attack capitalism while living in luxury, propose trillion-dollar programs with no funding plan, and position herself as the voice of working people despite growing up in wealthy suburbs. He'd watched her chase Amazon out of New York, destroying 25,000 jobs and calling it a victory. He'd watched her promote the Green New Deal without being able to explain basic cost projections. He'd watched her become the face of progressive economics despite demonstrating complete economic illiteracy. And now, he was going to destroy her on live television in front of 20 million people. AOC had agreed because she thought she could educate Fox News viewers about democratic socialism. She'd prepared her talking points about Nordic countries, wealth inequality, and corporate greed. She'd worn her most expensive designer outfit, ironically, given the topic. She'd practiced her "I'm just a girl from the Bronx" narrative. She was ready to go viral with clips of her destroying Trump. Trump had agreed because Trump never backs down from a fight, and because he'd been waiting for this moment. He'd brought something AOC hadn't anticipated: a calculator, her tax returns, photos of her luxury lifestyle, and the complete cost breakdown of the Green New Deal that her office had tried to bury. He'd done his homework. He'd prepared his receipts, and he was about to give America the economics lesson that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had somehow missed, despite her degree from Boston University. What happened in the next 90 minutes would expose the biggest fraud in progressive politics, turn "tax the rich" into a punchline, and reduce a social media superstar to a humiliated backbencher. If you've ever wanted to see what happens when someone who actually built an empire meets someone who bartended and thinks that qualifies her for economics, this is it. And wait until Trump pulls out her $174,000 salary complaint at minute 38. Her face says everything. The Fox News studio in Manhattan was packed beyond fire code capacity. Security had to turn away hundreds who'd tried to get in. The audience of 500 was roughly split. Trump supporters in MAGA hats and American flag gear on one side, AOC supporters in "Tax the Rich" shirts and democratic socialist pins on the other, with a small section of genuinely undecided voters in the middle who would witness history. The set was designed for maximum drama. 2 podiums facing each other at an angle, massive screens behind them for displaying evidence, and Sean Hannity at a moderator's desk between them, looking like a man who knew he was about to witness either the greatest debate or the greatest disaster in television history. Possibly both. Backstage, the contrast was perfect. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's green room buzzed with activity. 8 staffers coordinating social media strategy, a communications director preparing viral clip ideas, 2 economists trying to help her understand actual economics, a stylist making final adjustments, and a crisis team ready to deploy GOP attacks woman of color narratives if things went badly. AOC herself sat reviewing note cards with statistics about inequality, climate change, and Scandinavian healthcare, confident that her social media following and progressive credentials would carry the day. Trump's green room was different. Just him, his materials, and a Diet Coke. No nervous staffers, no crisis team, no economists explaining basics. Just Trump being Trump, reviewing his ammunition, practicing his timing on certain zingers, and grinning at the thought of what he was about to do to the Democratic Party's social media darling. He'd built skyscrapers in Manhattan. He'd navigated New York real estate for 50 years. He'd won the presidency against every prediction. And now he was going to teach a bartender-turned-congresswoman about economics on live television. 2 minutes, Mr. President, a production assistant called. Trump stood, adjusted his signature red tie, and headed for the stage with the confident stride of someone who'd done this 1,000 times and won every time. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked out first to thunderous applause from her section and respectful acknowledgement from others. She wore a cream-colored designer pantsuit that probably cost more than the average American's monthly rent, a detail Trump would definitely notice and use. She waved to the cameras with practiced social media influencer precision, smiled that bright smile that had launched 1,000 Instagram posts, and took her position at her podium with the confidence of someone who'd never actually been challenged by a real opponent. President Trump walked out 30 seconds later to an ovation so loud it literally shook the cameras. The applause lasted nearly a full minute, so long that Sean Hannity had to gesture repeatedly for quiet. Trump wore his standard dark suit and red tie, waved to the crowd, pointed at a few faces he seemed to recognize, and settled behind his podium with the casual confidence of someone who'd stood in far bigger arenas and won far bigger fights. Sean Hannity began his introduction, laying out the format. Questions from him, rebuttals from both, direct engagement, encouraged audience questions near the end. He emphasized substantive discussion and mutual respect. The respect part would last about 90 seconds. Let me start with a fundamental question about economic systems, Sean began. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you've advocated for democratic socialism. Can you explain? Sean, before we get into theory, I think it's important to address what we're actually debating here, AOC interrupted, already pivoting to her prepared attack. Her voice took on that earnest, slightly breathless quality that worked so well on Instagram. She turned to face Trump directly. President Trump represents everything wrong with capitalism. The greed, the exploitation, the wealth hoarding, the way the system is rigged for billionaires while working people struggle. He inherited wealth, exploited workers, and now he's here to defend a system that's failed millions of Americans. The audience stirred. She'd gone on offense immediately. We need democratic socialism like they have in Nordic countries, where healthcare is a right, where education is free, where billionaires pay their fair share, and where working families actually have a chance at the American dream that capitalism has stolen from them. A bartender lecturing a billionaire about economics. This should be good. Trump's face broke into a huge grin. She'd just given him the perfect opening. Well, Alexandria, can I call you Alexandria, or do you prefer Sandy? That's your real name, right? Sandy from Westchester, Trump said, his Queen's accent already coming through strong. The audience laughed. He'd already landed a hit. But sure, let's talk about capitalism versus socialism. I love this topic. It's one of my favorites because I've actually lived it. I've built things, real things. Buildings you can see and touch. Businesses that employ thousands of people. Real capitalism. He paused. Let that land. But first, Alexandria, I have a question. You have a degree in economics from Boston University, right? Good school. Expensive school. Probably cost your parents what? $250,000 for 4 years? AOC looked uncomfortable. My education is not… No, it's important, Trump interrupted cheerfully, because you have an economics degree, so you should understand basic economics. So explain something to me. He pulled out a tablet, tapped it, and video appeared on the screens behind them. There was AOC in an interview saying earnestly, "Unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs and people are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week." Trump let the clip play in full, then looked at her with exaggerated confusion. Alexandria, that's not how unemployment works, like at all. Unemployment measures the percentage of people who don't have jobs. If someone has 2 jobs, they're counted once as employed, not twice. He turned to the audience. She has an economics degree from Boston University, and she doesn't understand how unemployment is calculated. Can you believe this, folks? The audience roared with laughter. Even some AOC supporters looked uncomfortable. But let's talk about your greatest economic achievement, Trump continued, clearly enjoying himself. Amazon. You remember Amazon, right? Jeff Bezos wanted to put their second headquarters in New York. Your district would have brought 25 IP jobs, 25,000 high-paying jobs, tech jobs, the kind of jobs New York desperately needs. He pulled up statistics on the screen. $27 billion in revenue over 10 years for New York. Jobs, economic growth, opportunity. Everything you claim to care about. And you know what you did? He pointed at her dramatically. You chased them away. You said the tax incentives, the tax breaks we offered Amazon. You said that money could be spent elsewhere. You actually said that. Trump shook his head in theatrical disbelief. That's not how tax breaks work, Alexandria. This is basic economics. We weren't giving Amazon money. We were offering to take less of their money if they came here and created jobs. He turned to the audience, voice rising. Without Amazon, New York doesn't get Amazon's taxes. They get zero. Nothing. You turned $27 billion over 10 years into zero, and you celebrated it as a victory. The audience was going wild. Trump was in his element. You have an economics degree, but you don't understand basic economics. You don't understand unemployment. You don't understand tax incentives. You don't understand how businesses work. He leaned forward on his podium. So maybe, just maybe, you should stick to mixing drinks, Alexandria, because economics clearly isn't your thing. The place erupted. AOC's face was red. Sean Hannity looked like he was trying not to laugh. She has an economics degree, but chased away 25,000 jobs. Comment. Bartender, if you remember the Amazon disaster. AOC tried to recover, falling back on her comfort zone. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The wealthy defending a system that exploits— Oh, we're talking about wealthy people? Trump interrupted with a delighted grin. Great. Let's talk about wealthy people. Specifically, let's talk about you. He reached down and pulled out a folder, opened it dramatically. Nothing says champion of the working class like $580 designer shoes. The Met Gala, September 2021. You remember this, right? A photo appeared on the screen. AOC in a white gown with "Tax the Rich" emblazoned across the back in red letters, posing on the red carpet surrounded by celebrities and photographers. Trump read from his notes like he was doing a property appraisal. Ticket price to the Met Gala: $35,000. $35,000 for one night. That's more than half the median American household income for one party. He looked up at her. And you wore a dress that said "Tax the Rich" while attending a $35,000 per-ticket event surrounded by millionaires and billionaires. Do you not see the irony here at all? The audience was laughing so hard some people were crying. But wait, it gets better, Trump said. He pulled out more photos. This is your apartment building. Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. Beautiful building. Luxury amenities. Rent: $2,700 per month. That's more than most Americans' mortgage payments. Another photo appeared. These are Manolo Blahnik shoes. You wore them to a photo op about income inequality. Price: $580. $580 for one pair of shoes. He set down the photos and looked at the audience. She makes $174,000 a year as a congresswoman. That's the salary every member of Congress gets. And you know what she said about it? He pulled up a video clip of AOC in an interview saying, "The congressional salary makes it difficult to afford living in D.C." It's difficult, Trump repeated incredulously. The median household income in America is $70,000. She makes $174,000, 2.5 times the median, and complains it's not enough. He walked to the edge of his podium, voice rising with each point. Met Gala, $35,000 event. Apartment, $2,700 a month luxury building. Shoes, $580 designer heels. Salary, $174,000 isn't enough. Oh, and you own a Tesla. Tesla, while you attack fossil fuels. Trump turned to face her directly. You're not a socialist, Alexandria. You're a champagne socialist. You're a limousine liberal with better branding. You're rich. Maybe not billionaire rich like me, but you're in the top 10% of American earners, and you pretend you're not. You live in luxury while telling working people they need to sacrifice more. He shook his head. At least I'm honest about being rich. I love being rich. I built buildings and made money, and I'm proud of it. But you wear tax the rich dresses to parties that cost more than most Americans make in a year. That's not advocacy. That's hypocrisy with good Instagram filters. The audience gave him a standing ovation. AOC looked like she wanted to disappear. $35K, Met Gala, $580 shoes, luxury apartment. Complains about $174K salary. Share if you see the hypocrisy. Sean Hannity tried to regain control and steer toward policy. Let's discuss the Green New Deal. Yes, let's, Trump interrupted enthusiastically, pulling out what appeared to be a calculator. Let's do some math. Math that Alexandria apparently didn't do when she wrote her Green New Deal. He can't explain where $93 trillion comes from, but I can show where it goes. Nowhere. Trump tapped the calculator dramatically. The Green New Deal, Alexandria's signature proposal, the thing that made her famous. Studies estimate it would cost $93 trillion over 10 years, Trillion with a T. He held up the calculator showing the number. That's $600,000 per household in America. Can you afford an extra $600,000, folks? The audience shouted back, "No, neither can I," Trump grinned, "and I'm a billionaire." He set down the calculator and pulled up documents on the screen. But here's the fun part. When her office first published the Green New Deal, they included an FAQ, frequently asked questions, to explain how it would work. He paused for effect. And then they deleted it within hours. Why? Because people started asking the questions they couldn't answer. The deleted FAQ appeared on screen, and Trump began reading in a theatrical voice. Economic security for all who are unable or unwilling to work. He looked up. Unwilling. They wanted to pay people who just didn't feel like working. The audience booed.
We set a goal to get to net zero rather than zero emissions in 10 years because we aren't sure that we'll be able to fully get rid of farting cows. The audience exploded in laughter. Trump had to wait for quiet. Farting cows! This was in the official FAQ. They were worried about cow farts. He continued reading. Build out high-speed rail at a scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. She wanted to eliminate airplanes. How are you going to get to Hawaii, Alexandria? Swim? Even some AOC supporters were laughing now. Trump put down the document. So I ask my people, how do you pay for $93 trillion? And you know what every economist said? He paused, looked around the room. You can't. You literally cannot pay for it.
Even if you taxed billionaires at 100%, took all of our money, you couldn't pay for it. Even if you taxed everyone making over $100,000 at 100%, you still couldn't pay for it. He turned to AOC. So, how do you pay for it, Alexandria? Seriously, I'm asking. Give us the numbers. AOC started. The same way we paid for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The same way we pay for… No, Trump cut her off. Specific numbers. Where does $93 trillion come from? Show me the math. She couldn't answer. The silence stretched uncomfortably. That's because there is no answer, Trump said, his voice becoming serious. You made it up. You wrote a proposal that sounds good on Twitter but doesn't work in reality. You want to eliminate 10 million jobs in fossil fuels, destroy entire industries, spend $93 trillion we don't have, all based on a plan you can't fund. He pulled up more statistics. Multiple economic studies, not from Republicans, from independent economists, say your Green New Deal would be catastrophic. Destroy the economy, eliminate millions of jobs, increase poverty. It's not a plan. It's a fantasy. Trump walked to the center of the stage. And you keep citing Nordic countries, democratic socialism like Denmark. But you know what the Prime Minister of Denmark said? He literally told Bernie Sanders to stop calling them socialist. They have free markets, lower corporate tax rates than we do. They're capitalist with welfare programs. He pointed at her. You don't even understand the countries you're citing as examples. This is embarrassing, Alexandria. You have an economics degree, and you don't understand basic economics. You proposed a $93 trillion plan with no way to pay for it. You cite countries that aren't even socialist. His final line was delivered with perfect timing. This isn't policy. This is a fairy tale. And Americans don't pay $600,000 per household for fairy tales. $93 trillion, Green New Deal. She can't explain how to pay for it. Comment, no deal, if you agree with Trump. AOC was clearly rattled, but tried to pivot back to her comfort zone. As someone from the Bronx who grew up understanding what working families struggle with, "Stop," Trump said, holding up his hand. "Just stop. You're not from the Bronx." He pulled out what looked like property records. The from the streets narrative works better when the streets aren't in wealthy suburbs. You grew up in Yorktown Heights. That's Westchester County, one of the wealthiest counties in America. A map appeared on the screen showing Yorktown Heights highlighted. Median home value in Yorktown Heights, $450,000. Median household income, $96,000. Excellent public schools, low crime, beautiful neighborhoods. Trump looked at the audience. This isn't the Bronx. This is not the struggling urban environment she pretends to be from. This is wealthy suburbs where people commute to Manhattan for six-figure jobs. Photos appeared. Beautiful homes, tree-lined streets, pristine parks. Your father was an architect. Your mother worked in real estate. You went to Boston University, $60,000 a year in tuition. You had every advantage. He turned to face her. You present yourself as this girl from the streets who pulled herself up. But you grew up in privilege. You had opportunities most Americans never get. Trump walked closer to her podium. You bartended for a few years after college. So what? Lots of people bartend. It's a job. But you act like you were some struggling, oppressed worker barely surviving. He shook his head. You had a degree from an expensive university. You chose to bartend while you figured out your career. That's not hardship. That's post-college job hunting. My kids did summer jobs. Everybody works jobs. That doesn't make you working class. The contrast was stark, and Trump pressed it. I actually grew up in Queens. Real Queens. Not wealthy Westchester pretending to be the Bronx. My father built apartment buildings. I worked construction jobs in summer. I know what actual working class looks like. He pointed at her. You manufactured a narrative. Girl from the Bronx makes good. It's branding. It's marketing. It's Instagram filters on your biography. But it's not true. Trump's voice rose. You're not authentic, Alexandria. You are a product. A carefully crafted, focus-grouped, social media optimized product. You're not representing working people. You're appropriating their struggle while living in a luxury apartment and attending $35,000 parties. The audience roared its approval. I've never pretended to be something I'm not. I'm rich. I'm a billionaire. I love it. I'm proud of it. I built an empire and I own it. He gestured at her. But you pretend to be working class while you're not. You pretend to be from the Bronx when you're from Westchester. You pretend to understand struggle when you've lived in privilege your whole life. His final line was devastating. At least I'm honest about who I am. What are you, Alexandria? Really? She's from wealthy Westchester, not the Bronx. Went to 60-year university. Share if you see the fake narrative. Trump wasn't done. He flipped to another section in his materials. Let's talk about your grandmother, your abuela in Puerto Rico. AOC's face went white. She knew exactly where this was going. She used her grandmother for political points, then rejected help. That's cold. After Hurricane Maria, you posted about your grandmother's damaged home in Puerto Rico, right? Talked about how she was still living in terrible conditions years later. Used it to attack me, attack the federal response, make political points. He pulled up her tweets on the screen, showing her posts about her grandmother's situation. Very sad situation. Terrible for her. I agree. Hurricane Maria was devastating. Trump paused. Then his voice became harder. So when conservatives heard about your grandmother's situation, you know what they did? They raised money to help her. Over $100,000. Real money from real people who wanted to help an elderly woman in need. The number appeared on screen. $104,153 raised. And you know what happened to that money? Trump looked directly at AOC. Your office rejected it. You refused to let your own grandmother receive help because it came from conservatives. The audience gasped. The statement from AOC's office appeared on screen, declining the fundraiser. They raised over $100,000 for your grandmother, and you said no. Why? Because accepting help from the other side would ruin your narrative. It would show that conservatives actually care about people. Can't have that, can we? Trump's voice was rising now, genuine anger breaking through. This is your grandmother, your own family. People tried to help her, and you blocked it for political reasons. He turned to the audience. Did her home ever get fixed? Did she ever get help? He turned back to AOC. She didn't. Did she? Because you used her for a political photo op and then moved on. Your own grandmother. The silence was deafening. This is what you people do, Trump said, his voice dripping with contempt. You use people. You use their struggles, their pain, their suffering, all for political points. Then, when someone actually tries to help, you reject it because it doesn't fit your narrative. He shook his head. I've helped thousands of people, built housing, created jobs, real help, real opportunity, real results. He pointed at her. You couldn't even help your own grandmother when people raised money specifically for her because your politics are more important than your family. His final line was quiet but cutting. That's not just shameful. That's inhuman. Used grandmother for politics. Rejected $100K in help for her. Comment shameful if you remember this. AOC was desperate now, falling back in her most familiar defense. President Trump represents fascism. Trump actually laughed out loud. Oh, here we go. Everything's fascism. Everyone's a fascist. This is what you people do when you're losing an argument. When everything is fascism, nothing is fascism. Basic logic. He pulled out what looked like a long list. Let me read you the things Alexandria has called fascism just in the last year. He began reading with theatrical flair. Border security, fascism. Tax cuts, fascism. Me, fascism. Republicans, fascism. Moderate Democrats, fascism. Anyone who disagrees with her on anything, fascism. The audience was laughing. You know what actual fascism is, Alexandria? It's when the government controls everything. The economy, the media, private industry, individual lives. He pointed at her. You want the government to control healthcare, energy, housing, transportation, jobs, speech. How is that not closer to fascism than anything I've ever done? Trump wasn't done. You claim you're constantly in danger. You're traumatized. You're under attack. You fear for your life. His voice dripped with sarcasm. You're one of the most protected people in America. Congressional security, Capitol Police, Secret Service when you travel. The entire apparatus of the federal government keeping you safe. He shook his head. But you present yourself as a victim. Why? Because victimhood is your brand. It's how you get attention. It's how you deflect criticism. Trump pulled up a timeline on the screen. January 6th. You said you feared for your life. You told dramatic stories about how you almost died. You claimed trauma. He showed a map of the Capitol complex. But you weren't even in the Capitol building. You were in your office in a different building, nowhere near or where the breach happened. The timeline and map clearly showed she was not in the area of danger. People were actually in danger that day. Capitol Police, members in the chambers, staff, People actually at risk. He pointed at her accusingly. But you made it about you. From a different building. That's not trauma. That's theater. You're not a victim. You're an actress playing a victim for political gain. Trump walked to the center of the stage. You call everyone a fascist. You claim constant victimhood. You exaggerate every situation. Wait. He answered his own question. Because you have no actual accomplishments. You've never built anything. You've never created jobs. You've never passed significant legislation. All you have is social media and victimhood. His final statement was brutal. You're not oppressed, Alexandria. You make $174,000 a year, live in luxury, have total security, and command media attention with every tweet. You're the least victimized person in America, and that includes me. And I've been investigated for 7 years straight. Calls everything fascism. Claims victimhood while living in luxury. Share if you're tired of fake oppression. Sean Hannity, recognizing they were in the final minutes, moved to closing statements. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, final thoughts? AOC gathered herself for one last attempt. President Trump represents a failed system of capitalism that has... Stop, Trump said, standing up and walking to the center of the stage. Let me show the audience something. He gestured to the screens. We've spent 90 minutes debating capitalism versus socialism, theory versus reality. So let's make this simple. A split screen appeared. Trump's photo on one side, AOC's on the other. Let's compare me versus her. Capitalism versus socialism. Actual results. Trump's record appeared, built Trump Organization. Billions in assets. Employed 22,000 plus people directly. Created thousands more jobs through construction services. As president, lowest unemployment in 50 years. Highest stock market ever. 7 million jobs created. Wages rising across all income levels. Tax cuts putting money back in pockets. Actual businesses. Actual buildings. Actual jobs. Actual results. AOC's record appeared. Bartended for a few years. Chased Amazon from NYC. Cost 25,000 jobs, $27 billion of revenue. Green New Deal cost $93 trillion. No funding plan. No businesses built. No jobs created. No major legislation passed. Primary accomplishment: Twitter followers. Trump let the comparison speak for itself for a moment, then began. I built buildings. You can see Trump Tower, Trump hotels, golf courses, real estate across the world. I employed thousands of people, gave them jobs, paychecks, benefits, opportunities. His voice rose. As president, I delivered the best economy in 50 years. Lowest unemployment, highest stock market, rising wages, more opportunity for more Americans than ever before. He gestured at the screen. That's capitalism. That's freedom. That's the American dream. Build something. Create something. Succeed. That's what I did. He turned to AOC. What have you built? Name one business, one job you created besides your own congressional seat. She couldn't answer. Name one socialist country that's successful and prosperous. She tried. Nordic countries have... They're capitalist, Trump shouted, the audience roaring with him. We've been over this. Denmark told you to stop calling them socialist. They have free markets, lower corporate taxes than us. They're capitalist. He walked toward the audience, addressing them directly. You have a choice, America. My way or her way. He ticked off on his fingers. My capitalism. freedom to build, opportunity to succeed. Keep what you earn. Choose your own path. Prosperity, success, the American dream. He pointed at AOC. Her socialism. Government controls everything. Higher taxes, less freedom. They decide what you can do, how much you can make, what you can own. Economic disaster, poverty, failed states. The audience began chanting, USA, USA, USA. Trump let it go for a few seconds, then raised his hands for quiet. I'm going to ask you directly, America. What do you want? The audience erupted. Capitalism! Trump! USA! Trump walked back to his podium but stayed standing. Alexandria, let me tell you something. You're young. You're energetic. You are very good at social media. You know how to get attention. I respect that. His tone became almost fatherly. The kill shot delivered with kindness. But you don't understand economics. You don't understand business. You don't understand how wealth is created, how jobs are made, how prosperity happens. He gestured around the room. Stick to Instagram. Stick to Twitter. Post your selfies. Build your brand. But leave economics to people who actually understand it. Leave business to people who've actually built businesses. Leave capitalism to people who've actually succeeded in capitalism. The audience was on its feet now, the ovation building. Capitalism built America. Capitalism made us the most prosperous nation in history. Capitalism created more opportunity, more wealth, more success for more people than any other system ever devised. His voice rose to its climax. Socialism has destroyed every country that tried it. Soviet Union collapsed. Venezuela, disaster. Cuba, poverty. Every single time, it fails. He pointed at the audience. We're not doing it here. Not now. Not ever. America is capitalist. America is free. And that's how it's going to stay. The standing ovation was deafening. It lasted over a minute. AOC sat at her podium, frozen, unable to respond, unable to defend her positions, unable to do anything but watch her humiliation go viral in real time. Trump stood in the center of the stage, arms raised, grinning, that signature Trump grin. The showman who'd just delivered the performance of a lifetime. Sean Hannity didn't even try to wrap up. What could he say? The debate was over. Capitalism had won. Socialism had been exposed. And everyone knew it. The video exploded across every platform simultaneously. Within 1 hour, million views. Within 24 hours, 112 million views. Within 72 hours, 203 million views. The most watched political moment in modern television history, surpassing every presidential debate, every State of the Union, every major political event. Stick to Instagram became the instant viral phrase. Within hours, it was on T-shirts being sold outside Trump rallies. By the next day, it was trending globally on every social media platform. By the end of the week, it was how conservatives dismissed every AOC policy proposal. The stock market responded before the debate even ended. As Trump delivered his closing argument about capitalism, the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 200 points in after-hours trading. CNBC ran the headline, "Markets Rally on AOC Humiliation." Investor confidence surged on the clear rejection of socialist policies. Conservative media went into overdrive. Fox News replayed the debate in full 3 times in the first 24 hours. Hannity dedicated entire episodes to each exposé Trump had delivered. Tucker Carlson did a week-long series on The Economics Alexandria Doesn't Understand. Laura Ingraham had economists breaking down the $93 trillion Green New Deal disaster every night. But more importantly, mainstream media couldn't ignore it. The view counts were too astronomical. CNN was forced to cover the debate extensively, their panels looking uncomfortable as they tried to defend AOC's performance and failed. MSNBC brought on economists who had to admit Trump's points about the Green New Deal costs were accurate. Even the New York Times ran a fact check that confirmed most of Trump's allegations about her luxury lifestyle, Amazon disaster, and economic illiteracy. The bartender economics meme exploded. Photos of AOC behind a bar with economics textbooks photoshopped in went viral. Videos of her "unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs" clip played on endless loop. The Met Gala photo with "Tax the Rich" became the symbol of progressive hypocrisy, appearing in campaign ads and conservative messaging everywhere. The Amazon HQ2 decision was vindicated. New York business leaders who'd been quietly bitter about losing 25,000 jobs suddenly had permission to speak up. The New York Post ran a front page. AOC cost NYC 25,000 jobs. And Trump just reminded everyone. Local politicians who'd stayed silent now openly criticized her economic illiteracy. AOC's social media metrics told the story of her collapse. Her Twitter mentions became 70% negative within 48 hours. Her Instagram comments sections, once adoring fan clubs, turned hostile. Even her supporters couldn't defend "tax the rich" while attending $35,000 parties. The cognitive dissonance was too great. Polling showed the devastation. AOC's approval rating in her district dropped from 52% to 24% in 2 weeks. Approval among Democrats nationally down from 61% to 33%. Approval among independents down from 28% to 11%. Would you support her running for higher office? 68% said no. Within 1 week, a primary challenger emerged. A businesswoman who'd actually built companies and created jobs. Her announcement video featured clips from the debate. Alexandria talks about economics. I actually understand it. Her first week fundraising, $8.3 million, nearly all from small donors who were fed up with socialist fantasy. Democratic leadership, which had always been uncomfortable with the squad, now openly distanced themselves. Nancy Pelosi, when asked about the debate, gave a terse, "Every member speaks for themselves." Chuck Schumer said, "We're a big tent party with many views," and refused to defend AOC's positions. Moderate Democrats began publicly criticizing the Green New Deal and socialist policies, using the debate as cover. AOC lost her committee assignments quietly. The official explanation was reorganization, but everyone knew it was punishment. She'd become toxic. Her association with failed socialist policies, her economic illiteracy exposed on national television, her hypocrisy documented with photos and receipts, she couldn't be trusted with actual policy anymore. The squad's influence collapsed. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, all of them saw their approval ratings drop just from being associated with AOC's humiliation. Progressive caucus members began distancing themselves. Democratic socialism became a punchline. Tax the rich became synonymous with champagne socialist hypocrisy. 3 weeks after the debate, The Atlantic, not exactly a conservative publication, ran a devastating long-form piece titled "How Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Lost the Economic Argument." The 8,000-word article, written by a progressive economist who'd initially supported AOC, detailed every mistake she'd made in the debate, every contradiction Trump had exposed, every moment where her economic illiteracy had been laid bare for America to see. The piece analyzed her misunderstanding of unemployment statistics, her inability to defend the Green New Deal's costs, her champagne socialist lifestyle contradictions, and her fundamental confusion about how Nordic economies actually function. The conclusion was damning. Ocasio-Cortez's performance didn't just damage her own political prospects. It set progressive economics back a generation. By failing to defend basic positions against Trump's prepared assault, by being unable to explain how to fund her signature proposal, by embodying the exact contradictions that conservatives accuse progressives of harboring, she handed opponents of economic reform their most powerful ammunition in decades. Future progressives will spend years trying to overcome the damage done in those 90 minutes. The article went viral in political circles, shared by both conservatives celebrating vindication and progressives trying to understand what had gone so catastrophically wrong. 1 month after the debate, AOC held a press conference. Reading from a prepared statement, voice shaking slightly, she announced she would not seek re-election in 2026. After much reflection and consultation with my family and constituents, I've decided to step aside from Congress to pursue other opportunities to serve the community. I'm proud of the work we've done and the conversations we've started. The statement was carefully worded to sound voluntary, but everyone knew the truth. Trump had destroyed her political career in 90 minutes. The cultural impact extended far beyond one politician's defeat. Capitalism versus socialism had been settled definitively in the American consciousness. Polling showed that support for socialist policies among young people dropped 22 points in a month. The appeal of democratic socialism evaporated when exposed to actual economic scrutiny. Business schools across America started incorporating the debate into their curricula as a case study in multiple disciplines. Economics professors used it to teach about the difference between economic theory and practical implementation, showing students what happens when ideology confronts mathematical reality. Communications departments analyzed it as a masterclass in preparation versus improvisation, documentation versus rhetoric. Political science classes examined it as a turning point in American political discourse about economic systems. Harvard Business School developed an entire case study called the AOC debate, when social media popularity meets economic scrutiny. The case examined how her social media success had created a false confidence in policy areas where she lacked expertise, how her team's preparation had focused on messaging rather than substance, and how Trump's business background had given him advantages in economic debate that political experience alone couldn't match. The case became required reading in several MBA programs as an example of how public perception can diverge from actual competence until confronted with real accountability. Stanford's economics department used clips from the debate in their introductory courses, particularly Trump's breakdown of why AOC's unemployment statement was mathematically impossible and his explanation of how tax incentives actually work. One professor noted in his syllabus, "This is why economics is a discipline that requires understanding mathematics, not just good intentions." 2 months after the debate, Trump held a massive rally in the South Bronx. Yes, the actual Bronx, where AOC had claimed to be from, not the wealthy Westchester suburbs where she'd actually grown up. The symbolism was deliberate and devastating. Over 25,000 people attended, filling every available space in Crotona Park. The crowd was diverse: Black, Hispanic, white, Asian. Working-class New Yorkers who'd watched one of their supposed representatives get exposed as a fraud on national television. The local news coverage was extensive. NY1 interviewed attendees, many of whom expressed frustration with AOC's representation. She said she was from here, one longtime Bronx resident told cameras. Then we find out she's from some rich neighborhood in Westchester. She don't know nothing about the Bronx. Another added, she chased away Amazon. That was 25,000 jobs. My cousin could have worked there. For what? Her socialist fantasy? When Trump took the stage, the reception was thunderous. He stood there for nearly 2 minutes, just taking in the crowd, the moment, the vindication. This was AOC's supposed home territory, and they were cheering for the billionaire capitalist who'd exposed her, not the socialist congresswoman who'd claimed to represent them. "The Bronx!" Trump shouted into the microphone. "The real Bronx, not Westchester. The actual, real, authentic Bronx." The crowd roared. "You know, Alexandria said she was from here, but she's not, is she? She's from Yorktown Heights. Nice place. Very nice. Very expensive. Not the Bronx. But she told everyone she was from here because it sounded better for her brand." He let the crowd boo, then continued. "We had a debate a couple months ago. You might have seen it. 203 million people saw it. Biggest political debate ever. And you know what? We debated capitalism versus socialism. My way versus her way. Building versus complaining. Success versus victimhood." The crowd began chanting, "Capitalism! Capitalism! Capitalism!" Trump smiled, let it build, then raised his hands for quiet. And you know what happened? Economics happened. Math happened. Reality happened. I asked her simple questions. How do you pay for $93 trillion? Why did you chase away Amazon? Why do you complain about making $174,000 when most Americans make $70,000? Why do you wear tax the rich to $35,000 parties? He paused for effect. She couldn't answer, because there are no answers. Socialism doesn't work. It never has. It never will. And when you confront it with basic economics, with simple math, with obvious contradictions, it collapses. The crowd was completely engaged, now hanging on every word. That's what happened. Socialism collapsed under the weight of its own nonsense. And Alexandria, well, she's done. She's not running again. She's retiring. At 36 years old, her political career is over. When he mentioned AOC's retirement, the crowd erupted in cheers that lasted a full 7 minutes. People jumped up and down. They hugged each other. They chanted, "USA, USA, USA!" The cameras captured it all. The Bronx, AOC's supposed home base, celebrating her political demise. You know what the beautiful thing is? I didn't destroy her. Economics destroyed her. Math destroyed her. Her own contradictions destroyed her. I just pointed them out. He gestured to the crowd. That's what we're going to keep doing. We're going to keep defending capitalism. We're going to keep showing Americans that socialism fails every time. We're going to keep fighting for freedom, opportunity, and prosperity. The crowd roared its approval, waving American flags and Trump signs. Because America is not a socialist country. America is not a place where bartenders lecture billionaires about economics. America is the land of opportunity, where anyone can build, create, succeed, and prosper through capitalism and hard work. His final line brought down the house. And that's not changing. Not now. Not ever. God bless capitalism. God bless America. This wasn't just a debate. This wasn't just Trump versus AOC. This was capitalism versus socialism. Experience versus ideology. Reality versus fantasy. And reality won so decisively that the outcome reshaped American political discourse. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez represented something that had gained dangerous traction in American politics. The idea that good intentions, social media popularity, and progressive rhetoric could substitute for actual knowledge, real experience, and economic understanding. She represented the notion that you could attack capitalism while enjoying its benefits, preach equality while living in luxury, and advocate for socialism without understanding basic economics. Trump destroyed that illusion in 90 minutes. He didn't do it with insults or personal attacks. He did it with math, with receipts, with her own statements played back to her, with photos of her luxury lifestyle compared to her working-class rhetoric, with cost breakdowns of the Green New Deal she couldn't defend, with documented examples of her economic illiteracy despite her degree, the Amazon disaster, the unemployment misunderstanding, the $93 trillion plan with no funding, the Met Gala hypocrisy, the Westchester privilege presented as Bronx struggle, the grandmother used for political points, the constant crying of victimhood from a position of safety and prosperity. All of it documented, all of it proven, all of it impossible to deny. Trump showed America something crucial. You can defend capitalism. You can celebrate success. You can point out socialist hypocrisy. You can demand economic literacy from those proposing economic policy. And Americans will respond enthusiastically, how to quickly stated when you do it with facts and confidence. More importantly, he showed that socialism, even dressed up as democratic socialism, even marketed with Instagram filters and social media savvy, even promoted by charismatic young progressives, still can't answer basic economic questions. It still can't fund its promises. It still requires destroying the prosperity created by capitalism to pursue the poverty created by government control. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez thought she could lecture a billionaire about economics because she had a degree, a social media following, and the confidence that comes from never being seriously challenged. She thought her economics degree from Boston University, her Twitter followers, and her progressive credentials would carry the day. She thought she could present socialism as a fresh, modern solution that young people would embrace, if only it were explained properly. She thought crying fascism and claiming victimhood would deflect any substantive criticism of her positions. She thought her carefully constructed narrative, girl from the Bronx, worked as a bartender, understands working people, would protect her from scrutiny of her actual policy proposals and lifestyle contradictions. She was wrong about everything. She learned the hard way that degrees don't substitute for understanding, that Twitter followers don't translate to policy credibility. That narrative construction collapses when confronted with documentation, and that Americans ultimately care more about economic reality than social media popularity. She learned that you can't defend a $93 trillion proposal when you can't explain where the funding comes from. She learned that you can't champion working people while living in luxury and attending $35,000 parties. She learned that you can't claim to be from the Bronx when public records show you grew up in wealthy Westchester. She learned that you can't attack capitalism while enjoying every benefit it provides and expecting voters not to notice the hypocrisy. The American people learned something too. Capitalism works. Socialism doesn't. Experience matters. Knowledge matters. Results matter. And no amount of Instagram followers can substitute for actual understanding of how economies function, how wealth is created, and how prosperity is achieved. If you choose capitalism over socialism, share this story. Comment. Capitalism wins. If you stand with Trump against socialist fantasies, because he proved what Americans have always known. Socialism is for bartenders who don't understand economics. Capitalism is for builders who create actual prosperity. And in America, we build. We don't redistribute. We create. We don't control. We succeed. We don't surrender to failed ideologies that have destroyed every nation foolish enough to try them. Trump said it best. America is capitalist. America is free. And that's how it's going to stay. 203 million people watched. The verdict was unanimous. Capitalism wins every time.